Winging it is the next topic. You mentioned this in our pre-interview and you mentioned this again today. And it is such an important, just like lesson to learn that your entire career is winging it, right?
Yeah.
So this is our diary entry too. So I sort of like started making this theory when I was thinking about preparing for this podcast, how like when you're in the education model, when you're learning in school, any type of school, it's like you learn something, right? You get taught something, you learn it, and then you execute it, whether it's in a test or a project or something. But real life isn't like that, especially when you're in your career. It's more about you do something and either you do a really good job or a really bad job or an okay job. And then you learn something out of that. And then you decide if you're going to keep improving on it or if you're just going to give up. And I don't mean giving up in like a negative sense. I mean, just like maybe it's not right for you. And so you move on and do something else. What do you think about my theory, Craig? I don't have like a good question there. I just thought that was something that when you said it, it piqued my interest because I don't think people talk enough about the difference between how we learn in school and how we learn in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like we're taught in school that failing is bad.
Yeah.
If you don't fail, you aren't learning. Yeah. That's really what I believe. And so in school, we protect you from failing, and failing is bad, right? Failing is the F that you don't, that like if you're going to show a stock photo of school, if you fail it like that, that's bad. If you fail, it means that you tried, right? And at least you're trying, right? Like, and if you're not failing, you're not trying. And that I think is a really, I think that's super critical to like, to at least self-education, right? Like of always learning, right?
Absolutely. Sort of like going back to the fact that I was a straight A student till 10th grade, I used to think I was working so hard. And I used to be like, oh my God, why are these other students not working hard? Like, that's why they're not getting good grades. And then in my, junior, senior of high school, I started failing really badly. And I was like, I've never tried harder. Like, and this is the moment in my life where I'm studying my ass off. I'm doing everything in my power to try to get the good grades, and I'm still not getting it. Never tried harder. And that was like the first time where I started to like really look back at myself and being like, I was so cocky back then. Like there was such a lack of empathy for those other students because I thought I was doing the right thing. And I think that it really sucks because sometimes you sort of see that in teachers as well, where they're seeing students that are failing and they're like, hey, why aren't you trying hard? I don't know where that comes from, because maybe as a teacher, like you're trying really hard to teach these kids. And if they're not picking it up, you sort of feel like they're not maybe, giving you the time or attention that's needed to pick up on those skills.
I think that's a good way to summarize that. I think that's unfortunate that happens, when teachers don't look inward of like, well, if that didn't work, maybe I can try again, instead of like, well, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry that you went through that. I mean, I know that there's a lot out there.
And I think it's something that, like, I guess moving forwards, it would be really cool to sort of see an education system that encourages, not like, I feel like we tell people it's good to fail so you can learn, but we don't actually encourage them to fail. And I think that would be something that would be really cool to start seeing in the future.
Yeah.
To put students in situations where they sort of have to fail so that they have to learn what that feels like and how to, get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, especially in our world, right? Like if you get an error, that feels intense, and people are like terrified of that error, and rightfully so. If I can't read the error, how am I going to get out of this? How did I break the computer? Like even at that level, right? And so, yeah, I think that there's also, I think that same tone is there in people who are writing error messages where they're just like, you did something wrong. And it's like, oh, no, here, actually, this is what you're trying. And you can see that really well done and like nice CLIs with like, maybe you meant this, like, that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that was what I meant to you. So,
yeah. And even like on that note, how like developers will break production. And in the moment that you break production, you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
But then all the senior engineers are like, oh, we've all been there.
Exactly. It's a rite of passage.
Exactly. It's not that big of a deal. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about going from we've spoken about becoming a teacher from a developer. How did you go from that to becoming a developer educator and like where you're at right now?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I came out of Peace Corps, and I ended up at a nonprofit, and it was a pretty tech-heavy nonprofit. They kind of like own the market for job listings and things like that. And I was excited that like, oh, cool, this will help they were like helping other nonprofits. So I was like, oh, cool, I can spread my wisdom this way, and we can go and learn, and I can learn a bunch. And we ended up doing, I ended up there for a long time. I became a manager. I enjoyed that sort of stuff. But like the whole time, what I really liked about being a manager was being able to lift people up. And I was like, I missed that bit of teaching. I missed like being in front of a room of people, because like that was getting back into my theater stuff. Like I liked that, because like being able to think on your foot is very improv. Like it was very improv, like lights out. Okay, here we go, Jeopardy. Like there's a bit of that I really liked, and that scratches an itch that I have. And at this nonprofit, you get to go on a sabbatical. I went on a sabbatical, and I stared at the water, as you do. You know, I feel like every time in my career, whenever I make a change, I went and stared at the water. Sure, I did before Peace Corps as well. And I was like, I want to teach. I wish there was some way that I could teach and still use my skills that I have and not go back into the college system. I don't want to be a weeder teacher. I don't want to do that ever. I don't want to and I don't have those skills. I don't want to go and do that. Like, I wish there was some way I could do that. And I Googled, and it just so happened that we were living in Portland at the time. In Portland, there was this company called Treehouse that was looking to hire a developer who wanted to do teaching on camera. And this was like super new, like that concept of like, sign up for this thing and watch this course. And like, it's like, oh my gosh, you can do that. And so they were looking for a Java teacher, and I was like, I've got that in there. I think I have that. So I went and winged it and pretended like I knew how to do this stuff, and gave a Java lesson, and I got the job, which I'm like so grateful for. That like just all those things just kind of like happened together. Total luck of for some reason we were in Portland because of, we went through New York to Buenos Aires to Portland, and just randomly in Portland to be able to do this. So it's like, just worked out really nice.
That's so cool. And this is at a time, like you said, this hasn't been done before. So it's not like you've watched videos of other developer advocates or developers doing this. This is sort of like you saying, hey, those are skills that I have from very different aspects of my life that I can put together and do this job. But I've never done it. I've never seen it been done before. So I'm just going to go in and try it. And see if it works out, and learn from that. And like the topic that I wanted to really talk about is transferable skills, because you haven't been thinking about like planning your career and one day I'll become a developer educator. You sort of have just been like following your passions, and every step of the way been picking up these skills of like, how do you improvise in a class? Where did you get those improv skills from theater, right? How did you get into theater from your own interests in arts and those types of things? And it's so interesting how those things just start like colliding with each other into this one like almost perfect job, right?
It's amazing. Like it is amazing when that happens, and it doesn't feel real. And I love that about DevRel in general, where you're like, wait, I get to do what?
Literally everything I've ever wanted to do.
And I think that there is I feel like there is a place for everybody, and you will find what that is. If you just love the challenge of like trying to write documentation that someone's going to, like, a very complex thing, and there's people who love that and they find that, and it's so cool. It's so cool that like it exists. Outside of just being a developer too, because like that's also a thing. People love doing developer. They love that stuff too, which I also think is fun. But if I do it too much, I'm like, ooh, I'm missing what I love. And so
All right, and then our next talk is going viral. That's something that is, everyone wants to do it. It's so difficult. You've gone viral a couple of times, actually. You have the free code camp thing, and then you have the dunking tank thing. So is there a formula to it, or is that also just winging it?
I don't know. I think that people love authenticity. So the more authentic you can be, the more you'll do it. But I was just being myself, right? Like I was just being, you got to let your dork out a little bit, I think. You have to so with the free code camp, when I was at Treehouse, I love free code camp. I love the idea that like here's this resource for free. Everyone go learn this. And that's just totally like lines up with what I've always wanted to do. And I was finally at Treehouse kind of viewed them as a competitor. So I was unable to work with them, but when I saw that after being at Treehouse, I was like, ooh, how do I work with them? And so I was able to finally work with them and said, hey, you don't have a course on APIs. I know that is a prerequisite for almost everything that we ever need to know. Would you like that? And Bo, the guy, we don't need to say Bo's name. Yeah. And the content director at Free Code Camp said we would love to have a course on that. I was like, oh, awesome. And then I was like, ooh, wait, I am not in any sort of brand right now. I don't have any sort of like constraints, right? Because like at Treehouse, there were constraints around it, but it was super lucky that like the timing was just right where there was a lot of people from Treehouse that were available to help me put this together. And there's something about making a course where it's like I can liken this to a band. We can draw parallel.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. Parallels.
When you're writing a song and you're like, here's this little bit, this riff I have, and then the drummer's like, what about this to it? Yeah. And you're like, ooh, that's cool. And it's your idea, but it's got these layers, right? It's like there's these more. It's not just you. And when a song comes out, you know that it's not just that person, unless it's like Smashing Pumpkins, then it's just that person. But like usually there's like there's a whole band that comes together and puts it together. And if you can get the right group of people, which we did, we had the motion design in that thing is just gorgeous. And the ideas that we had, we were kind of experimenting. And we're like, let's just be dorky and let's remember that this is people's first time ever thinking about this. And what does it mean to do that? Like, what does it mean to think about, if you don't know what an interface is, like, how do you talk about an API? It's one of the letters. Like, how do you talk about that? So we just took it and just took the time that you needed and just inserted the dorkiness, and like people enjoyed that. Oh. And some people didn't, as as they do. But I just do that. And like, people will say, I wish you didn't do that. And I was like, well, sorry, that's always going to be there. And I know that the silly stuff has to be in there from experience. Like we did hundreds of courses at Treehouse, and that was the formula that worked for me because that's my style. I got to, if there's not a dad joke in it, it's not, you're waiting for it. And like, if you know my work, you're like, oh, he's going to do a joke here. Oh, here it comes. And like, and I love that. I love leaning into who you are. And I think, now I coach people on, we'll do webinars and we'll have people come in and it'll be dry. And I'll be like, can you make that more about yourself a little bit? Like, what do you like about it? And once they do that, it opens up and like, it comes across on the camera, and people want that because we're people, we're learning this stuff, and we relate that way. And I think that's what the Free Code Camp thing was. It was we launched it in end of December of 2019, and it broke 4 million views, which I've just never dreamed of. And so there was some struggling going on, so we bumped it. We did a reboot, and it's broken 400,000 already. The new one that's out this year. Yeah. So like, just incredible, and there's a need for it. So yeah, I think the formula is be yourself, and like, remember, there's a great like Ira Glass quote where he's like, you should look it up. We can look it up afterwards. But something along the lines of like, what made you do what you're doing is your taste. Mm-hmm. You have good taste, and when you produce stuff, it might feel bad, right? But that's your taste, and you will make it better. But you have to try. And like, we're in one now. You're trying this podcast, like you talked about.
We'll see how it goes. Exactly. Yeah, but exactly. We'll get feedback, and then we'll figure out if we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and you're learning.
And that's so important, because I feel like be yourself is one of those, like, everyone says it, and you never, when you first hear it or like first try to apply it to your own content, it's so difficult to do. I remember in our serverless code camps that we used to do every summer, at the end, students get a chance to sort of like present their work in a lightning talk. And almost every time, the first draft, when they first do like a dry run of it, they're trying really hard to put across some good points, but it's like a presentation, right? It's like, here, this is who I am. This is what I did. This is why I did it. Awesome. And like, the most common feedback that I would ever give to students was, let's go back to that initial slide where you're talking about yourself and actually talk about yourself. Like, tell us more than what grade you're in and what school you're going to, right? Tell us about your interests, because more often than not, those things tie so well into why you solve that problem. Right. And once people see that connection, they're so invested, right? Dad jokes and like humor and funny things, those are that's part of who you are, which is why it works with the content.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that everyone has to put in jokes or memes into their slides.
And they shouldn't if it's not them, right?
Exactly. They shouldn't. But if you're more of an emotional storyteller, if you're more of somebody who's like extremely passionate about some, like, I don't know, global warming or just like the environment, whatever problem you're solving, show that passion because that's what gets people so invested.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you're going to be making your best work because it's truly yours.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. What's the value of creativity in tech, right? We're basically just talking about this. What is your answer to this?
Oh, I mean, it's fun. I think like have fun with it because when you do, people need it. First of all, this stuff is dry. There's a lot of dryness here, and especially in tech, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be dry. It can be fun, and you can figure out ways to make it fun as long as it's not too distracting. And that balance is hard to do.
And that's our entire job, right? Like trying to find ways to make things fun for other developers. Yeah. In ways, and like go to places where they're gonna have that fun, right? Like whether that's at an event, whether that's at a virtual conference or whatever that is. But yeah, there's a lot of really awesome things to learn from the journey that you've been on so far. And thank you so much for joining me in my first pilot podcast.
I am so honored to be here.
Yeah, and sharing your stories. And I'm excited to sort of see other people start learning from your experiences and then applying what you learned to their own situations and everything. And yeah. Thanks for joining. That's it. I don't have an outro, but that's it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig.
That was good. I love the diary bit.